Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I like to discuss the pitfalls of trying to ram a square peg into a round hole via the medium of party and public priorities. Essentially, the dangers for a political party of spending too many resources on pleasing the narrow interests of the party with the often very different priorities of their much more important voters. And I'll be doing this with the Conservative Party and the Labour Party to try and highlight the importance. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, in general, my experience of British politics is that the Conservatives are the sharper of the two main operators for forming Westminster governments. Labour focus on policies that we as Labour members believe are the best for the country, but by essentially ignoring what voters believe. And usually this is done by pretending that most voters believe what we do. The Conservatives, however, are very good at making offers that appeal to their target voters. They're very realistic about it. Even though they fail to actually deliver them in government, they have no interest in backing their promises up. But because they tailor those offers to the public, despite it being dishonestly, they win more elections. Quite a lot more. But the tables may be turning. Problem is, a lot of people who want the Tories removed from power don't seem to be happy about it. But let me explain. So I'll discuss the Conservatives first, because we have a very interesting situation. Right now, the Tory party contest means that various MPs are talking about issues that matter a great deal to them and to the wider Tory party members. And they're also making policy promises that are designed to appeal to Tory MPs and the wider membership. But, and this is important, they seem to be making no effort to tread a path between what the party wants and what their voters want. And there are not much more than 100,000 Tory party members. It's difficult to say exactly because they don't always publish the numbers. But what, something about 140,000 I think it might be. But they need about 12 or more million to vote for them, give or take. Now let's look at two policy areas, culture wars and the economy. Various Tory candidates are pushing their culture wars because it appeals to both Tory MPs and Tory party members. The All, for example, all of them, even the sane ones, have committed to the Rwanda scheme. But a recent article in the Times referenced a report that suggests it's actually a big turn-off to a lot of their voters in the south of England particularly. The results showed that while the policy can be popular in the Red Wall, which is an important area for the Conservatives to target, it's really unpopular in their south of England seats where they're up against the Lib Dems. Now, the analyst in me looks at that and goes, well, they're in danger of losing more Red Wall seats to Labour than south of England seats to the Lib Dems. So maybe you could use the policy to gain more than you lose. The problem with that is the logic will fall down if it's not enough to retain those Red Wall seats. It's like, is this the policy, the difference between winning and losing them? Because if not, it just ends up costing extra seats in the south of England without gaining you any in the north. And when you consider their economic promises, I would say this is going to be the case. Brainless immigration policies may appeal to people in the Red Wall where, despite the labour shortage nationally, there it's jobs that's short of. But what voters really want in the Red Wall is for the government to deal with the cost of living crisis. That's way more important. The problem is that their economic promises will make it worse. So what we have are Tory leadership hopefuls promising policies that will find favour with the party, but will really annoy the voters they need to target. One set of policies will annoy those in the Red Wall, one set will annoy them in the Blue Wall and could cost them seats everywhere. Of course, this is just a leadership contest. It's possible that the winner, once they've done with the party, thanks very much for voting me in, will then start to focus more on what voters want and soften those promises that they just made to their more extreme and much less numerous members. And based on past Tory behaviour, I would expect them to take this more strategic approach. But what if they don't? I've already talked recently about the control that the extremists in the parliamentary party have. The winner of the leadership contest won't actually be invested with a great deal of power. They won't be as powerful as Boris Johnson, for example. They'll be vulnerable to rebellions, just like Theresa May was once she lost her majority. Except this time they'll have a large majority, but they won't have the authority that goes with it. If they don't keep their more insane colleagues on side, we may well see a situation whereby the party leadership has to focus on keeping the MPs and membership happy in order to maintain their personal authority within the party, or at least the charade of it. But this will be at odds with what their target voters want. The obvious consequence of this is they do not appeal to voters in the next general election, and if Labour do, they get their offer right, the Tories lose power. Brilliant. Of course, the ideal solution for any political party is to try and focus on policy areas which are of common value. Because if both party members and their target voters all consider the same policy areas the most important, and they both approve of the same approach, well, you've hit the jackpot, haven't you? You can make both party and voters happy and win power without having to fight in your own party. But this is an ideal situation which almost never happens. In reality, you either have to disappoint the voters, in which case you can lose power at the next election, or you'll disappoint your own party, in which case you may have civil war. This is what the Tories made for themselves at the last election. They made impossible promises about Brexit and levelling up. They promised contradictory things. When it came time for delivery, Johnson had to piss off either the members or the voters. In the event, he somehow managed to piss both of them off. The next leader's going to have the same choice. If they choose to piss off the voters, they'll lose the next election. If they choose to piss off their party, they'll find that their position is very weak. None of the possible candidates to replace Johnson are strong leaders in their own right. They're all basically, we've seen them, haven't we? We've seen their campaigns. They're all basically useless. They'll be little better than puppets who had better move the right way when the strings pull. Which brings me on to Labour. Now, there are a lot of policy areas which could create friction between party and voters, but let's focus on my personal priorities, Brexit and proportional representation. Easiest thing in the world for Labour to start attacking the extreme Tory Brexit and absolutely push electoral reform with proportional representation as a key manifesto promise. Be very popular in the party. In fact, I hope the latter of those two is that mythical case where it's popular with both party and voters, because that'll be easy and we'll get it. But I don't know that. And if it's not, I absolutely support them, prioritising any policies that the voters want, basically. But when it comes to Brexit, we know a little more. They're certainly creating some consternation amongst people who would otherwise support them. Now, I think those people are mad, because at the next election, here is the choice. Objectively, here is the choice. So with the Conservatives, you get further divergence from the EU. We may already have triggered a trade war with them, but if not, we certainly will in the next Parliament. Or if it has already started, it'll be a continuation. There's no way that these Tories can back down from it. No way. Our social fabric will fail further. Our economy will collapse further. And we will get the opposite of what those who oppose Brexit want. Using your vote to support that is madness. With Labour, however, we get veterinary agreements, mutual recognition of qualifications, comprehensive security agreement, agreements for short-term labour exchange. It's not as good as single market access, but we can't get that just yet anyway. And it's a damn sight better than what we do have or will get with the Tories. We also get closer cooperation with our European partners. I've said it before. Starmer and Lammy have just been for a visit to Germany for 2 days to talk about ways to achieve closer relations with Chancellor Scholz. I expect them to carry out similar visits to France, Spain, the Netherlands, Italy, perhaps others before the next election as well. It's not what some people want. The ruling out of single market access for time immemorial, which is a silly thing to pay attention to, by the way, that's annoying people. But here's the thing. In fact, I'll say two things to that. First, it's ridiculous to say you'll use your vote to help the Tories because Labour aren't anti-Brexit enough in their rhetoric, because it is just their rhetoric. In terms of their policy promises, this is as anti-Brexit as you could get. I would be willing to bet that not a single person in the comments can name a single Brexit reversal policy that is actually possible right now. Because single market isn't possible right now. We have to lay the groundwork. You try and name me, if there was a general election tomorrow, new government came in, you name me one Brexit reversal policy that would be possible to do immediately that Labour haven't already committed to. There aren't any. But the second thing is this. Those people who think they'll vote Green or Lib Dem and let the Tories win their seat, and that'll show Labour, that'll teach them. So there will be people like that, inevitably. And actually, as these people may not like to hear this, do you know what? It doesn't actually matter. You know, these people are thinking that your Labour will be sorry. No, they won't. I would urge people not to have this attitude because it's self-defeating. It's risking the opposite of what you want. But it is the classic case of making great the enemy of the good. There's lots of people do that. But Labour are behaving strategically. They're not being foolish. People think, oh, they're being foolish, they'll lose my vote. They're not being foolish. They are carrying out careful polling. Okay, I don't know how well they're analysing it because I don't get to attend their strategy meetings. But it's quite clear they're behaving strategically. And I've seen no evidence that they're getting it wrong. And what they know is this. There are people who will say they will vote against Labour if they don't become anti-Brexit enough. And you know where they are? Because Labour know where they are. They're in either seats that Labour can't win, in which case we can't win anyway. Or they're in seats where Labour currently win by large margins. We have a first past the post system. You win your seat if you win one more vote than the person coming second. That's it. One vote. You don't even have to win by one vote if you're lucky. If you get exactly the same number of votes as another person, they flip a coin or draw straws or something. That's actually how it's decided. But you don't want to rely on that. One vote. If you live in a northern anti-Brexit city, that tends to be, because we talk about, Brexit attitudes in the north of England, not in the cities. In the cities, it's very anti-Brexit. Like Manchester or Liverpool, wherever. Labour win those seats by a large margin. A lot of people will vote pragmatically. The people who would seriously, and there are people, the people who would seriously use their vote to spite Labour, even though it might give us another hard Brexit Tory government, are in such numbers and located in such places that all it'll do is reduce those bloated majorities that Labour have in those seats. It'll mean they win those seats by a smaller margin. But do they still win the seat? Yeah, they still win the seat. People may not like it, but Labour are making the decision to focus their appeal on the voters they need to flip tight seats in their favour. Not win already comfortable seats by an ever larger margin. They're actually trying to win power. The only thing that can make even a single policy reality, winning power. Political strategy is fairly complex and very nuanced. And my advice to people is try and avoid falling for the simplistic empirical arguments that you see all too often on social media. Someone says a thing, because you're naturally wanting to believe it, you go, oh, that makes sense. And think things through. Think it all through. Because we could be looking at a general election in a couple of years where normal service is completely flipped upside down. We have a Tory party that is looking inwards and abandoning its voters, and a Labour Party that is looking outwards and winning power. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.